start in about 2 minutes. Economic Opportunity Training Day. I'm Libby Crawford, the Director of the Economic Opportunity Division. Thank you for coming. This is the first year that we're streaming this presentation live, so there'll be about a 20-second delay between what you see in the classroom and what they see on YouTube. If there is a delay in the stream where it becomes pixelated, we're also videoing this presentation and we'll put it on our website. So if you're in live with the audience here, please make sure your cell phone's on silent so it doesn't delay the video filming. And then I want to talk just a little bit about, we're going to have 3 separate parts of the presentation today that correspond to the 3 separate parts of the Economic Opportunity Division. The Economic Opportunity Division certifies disadvantaged businesses. You'll hear that part of the presentation first. We also provide supportive services to disadvantaged businesses and our cycle. We will have public meetings in June to talk about what we believe the figure will be for our disparity study for 17, 18, 19. I encourage you to attend those and participate and ask questions, and we will be setting our goals sometime after that. It's due to Federal Highway August 1st, 2016. So there will be question and answers at the end of each section. If you could please hold your questions to the end of the section, we'll answer those so that the editing then can be clear for the website. And then finally, you'll all receive a survey after the end.
To talk to you a little about a map, geographical map added, and also some of the features in the filter parts of it. If you're not familiar with the website, when you go into in.gov/indot, look for under doing business with NDOT, look for the Economic Opportunity website. You might want to save this, you want to bookmark this, you want to save this to your favorites. I do encourage you to do not go to use your internet search engines to find the DB directory. Do not do that. That is not going to give you a current listing of the DB directory or the current DBs that are certified in the program. So you always want to reference the EOD website, which is located at the bottom of this screen. As you are trying to find DBEs, which is really important when you start filling out, and also a networking tool. So both prime contractors, DBEs, you may want to make yourself familiar with this website, with this directory. It's good to know that the directory is updated weekly. So weekly, there are firms that are added to this list, there are firms that are removed from the list, there are firms that are suspended from the list, and there are firms that may receive code changes. So once again, you always want to reference this directory from this website for the most current listings, most current information as far as DBs. From the directory, and I also mentioned that from the website, there is also a user guide included with the actual application. From the directory, there are actually 5 different search filters that you can use. You're actually able to search a firm by its company name, if you know the name, by activity code, DB category specialty, district, or DB code. Company name, what's important to know about the company name is that there is a drop down on the far right. If the company is DB certified, currently DB certified, their name will appear on that list. If their name does not appear on that list, they are not DB certified. At that point in time, you may want to contact our office to find out why, if they're not. But just know if they're not on that list, they are not considered DB certified. Activity code. Activity code is referenced by the North American Industry Classification System, or commonly known as the NAICS code. So for those of you who are familiar with what a NAICS code is and what that NAICS code number is, you you're actually able to search the firms by that as well. The DB category specialty, this was mostly related to pay items. So for you that are estimators, you're familiar with the pay items that are on the NDOT contracts. This is the easiest way to search for DBEs. So you want to go by the specialty or category. District, this can be confusing. A lot of contractors think that the district simply means that this is where the DB is located. It is not where they're located. It simply references where they're willing to work. So we have over 650 DBs in our pool, and what that's referencing is those DBs are telling you that they're willing to work in that geographical area. So we have the 6 districts across the state, so you may see a DB listed for all 6. It's very possible. DB code. DB code is actually an internal NDOT specific identifier. However, for those of you who are really familiar with contracting and the contracting process, if you've been in contact with DBs who provided you with their certification letters or certification certificates and things of that nature, they may provide you with a DB code. You can search those DB firms by that code as well. Okay. It's also good to mention, although I mentioned that there are 5 different search filters, there's actually a 6th one. Because from that list, if you look at the apply button at the very bottom, that will allow you to compile a complete listing of all the DBEs. An example, if you were to try to search for DBs that are located in the Vincennes district, you have no idea what specific item, what specific load. In the information table, as you can see, you will find information regarding the contractors, all their contact information, in all the areas in which they're certified in. From that, I do encourage you to utilize the export table. Export that information to an Excel spreadsheet. This is important because it allows you to simply, you can sort your data to where it's more useful and manageable for you. So if you are in the process of building your own DBE database, this is very useful. If you're trying to simply compile a list for that specific date, this is very useful. And it's actually, like I said, the best way to actually manage the information that's going to come from the DBE director. It's also good to know that for both contractors and DBEs, become very familiar with the DBE directory. Do not wait until bidding time to actually know where this tool is available. You want to plug in it before that time. DBEs, you also want to make sure that you know that you're very familiar with this actual application because, once again, this is your marketing tool. You want to make sure that the information that's listed for your firm is accurate. In the event that it's not, you want to contact our office so that we can help you market your firm accurately or you're represented as you should be. Okay. Are there any questions regarding the DBE directory? If there are no questions, Kimberly Sons will present on certification standards.
Good morning, my name is Kimberly Sons. I am formerly known as the DBE coordinator, so a lot of you might know me by that, but I am now a certification specialist. So I'm going to talk about the no change affidavit. Currently, the no change affidavit was formerly known as the annual update. It became the no change affidavit in August of last year. The slide that is up here, you must report your company, your ownership, your services provided, and ownership of equipment if something's changed within your company within 30 days. You do that, on your company letterhead, in an email to the email address that's listed, which is dbecertification@ndot.in.gov. The no change affidavit process requires that you fill out the no change affidavit form, and it requires certain documents be turned in on an annual basis. On the month that your annual information is due. It requires the no change affidavit, tax forms, and other information as required. And keeping
Personal net worth with you. This is one of the items that we look at on applications when they come. Your personal net worth cannot exceed $1.32 million. Retirement accounts, which would be your IRAs, 403 investment accounts, which would be like stocks and bonds. Assets held in trust, shareholder loans, life insurance, real estate, and under this you want to include your primary residence, which is excluded, but we will make the adjustment for you. You want to include any rental properties, collectibles, clothing, and then personally owned vehicles that are leased or rented to businesses or other individuals. And under other assets, you want the total value of any other business investments, like if you own a couple other businesses, you'd want to include that. On the liability side, you would include like mortgages on your real estate, loans on life insurance policies, any notes or accounts payable to banks and others such as auto, credit cards. Then you want to include unpaid taxes and any other liabilities that you would have on your personal net worth. Another thing that we look at, it's called factors considered for ability to accumulate substantial wealth. Here we're looking at your adjusted gross income of the owner over the most recent 3-year period, whether the income was reinvested in the firm or used to pay taxes arising in the normal course of operations by the firm, and whether the total fair market value of all the owner's assets exceeds $6 million. Calculating the adjusted gross income, or AGI, for corporations, we'll look at the officer's salaries, and we'll get this information from the 1120S tax form or your W-2s. The business income from the K-1s for the corporate taxes, less the Section 179 deduction for depreciation. And we will verify that for your personal taxes on your Schedule E. Less any tax due from your personal taxes to come up with your adjusted gross income. For individuals, we look at your schedule, we get your personal taxes in for that, but we're looking at your Schedule C for your net profit or loss from the business, your wages, which would be coming from your W-2s, less any total tax due. All schedules and W-2s for the individuals, and if you own multiple businesses, we'll need your taxes for those other companies also.
For the small business owners who have not applied for the DB certification program, who may be interested in applying, I wanted to just touch on some of the pitfalls when it comes to applying to the actual program. Most commonly, applications that actually come in that are not complete. Causes a problem because, one, it can cause a delay in the actual processing, but it is the most common and easiest way to actually close your application to prevent any further processing of it. So it's very important that you pay close attention to the certification checklist that is attached to the actual application. Once again, missing items will cause a delay, and if you're not responding to our requests or reminding you that something is missing, something that we need, it can result in actually closing your application. Our program does not have a 2-year rule. Therefore, for firms that are applying to the program, expertise. We look at expertise very, very closely. So the lack of expertise by the majority owner is going to be scrutinized and evaluated very closely. This is most commonly encountered when we run into husband and wife-owned firms. It's just good to know that the expertise, experience really has to be demonstrated in whatever that primary activity in which the firm is trying to get certified for. By expertise, there has to be some demonstration in your experience, education, or training. For example, a construction firm that is now owned by the female, that we're told is owned by the female. If there has not been any previous experience in the construction industry, where she simply record shown that she was a homemaker, come from the nursing industry or something of that nature, that's going to be scrutinized very closely. And in that instance, that's going to pretty much demonstrate that expertise has not been demonstrated. As Mike alluded, personal net worth. This is not a program for millionaires, unfortunately. So personal net worth is going to be scrutinized and looked at very closely. So that the DBE's abilities. So know that if you're applying and if you think that you are wealthy, you may not want to submit your application. That is actually required in the program. And then what that tells us, or what that's asking is that for those who are applying, your initial investment, what did it take for you to start the business? What did it take for you to actually open your doors to start a business? So we're looking at what's called the initial investment. What did it take for you to obtain majority ownership in the company? A lot of times, applications that are received where $51 is contributed to account for 51% may not be considered majority ownership or be considered real substantial ownership. So you want to look at that. You really want to pay attention to, we're going to actually look at what retained earnings of the firms are and what 51% of what those earnings really equate to and whether you've actually attained majority ownership. Applying for firm, like I said, make sure your application submitted, make sure it's complete. Is going to ensure a very quickly response team the integrity of our DB program as well. Any questions regarding application pitfalls? As Kimberly stated earlier in her presentation, we are truly going electronic. We've tried to give the heads up and I would say warnings because there's not really a warning, but announcement that through our newsletters that we are going electronic, which is scheduled to go this summer, somewhere around July or August. So what that means is that no more paper submissions for certification related materials. So what's our NDOT's Management Information Systems Division has done. They've created an electronic application through our NDOT Technical Application Pathway, also known as ITAP, where users are able to go in and set up an account. And through this account, you're going to be submitting everything electronically. We are, and part of that's due to our efforts to go paperless, to create a paperless environment. But also it's going to make our program, this process, a little more efficient and a little more effective. So through this process, some of the benefits simply include that in-house, it's going to eliminate a lot of the storage cabinets and storage space that's required now that where we have our paper forms. But electronically, storing these materials electronically is going to help both NDOT and you as the applicant. Right now, you actually, through this system or through this application process, you'll be able to retrieve, review everything that's related to your DB certification. That includes all no change affidavits, that's include all supportive documents that you've maintained or that you've submitted. For those of you who are interested in applying for like interstate certification, this is going to help you a great deal because no longer do you have to search for where you have your original application and go and copy it. It's going to be available for you electronically. So you actually get to log into ITAP, into your user account, find that application, find that submitted supportive material, and you can submit it to the respective states as you're applying. So once again, the electronic application is scheduled to launch in July, August of 2016. Our efforts to make sure that we maintain the integrity of the program. Now, there will be training. So our plans are to provide training prior to the launch of this application, along with there being continuous support. So through webinars, tutorials, workshops, online technical help, there will be training and support available for you. Any questions regarding the electronic application? Let's know. I will turn it over to Sean Howard, Support Services.
Morning. I'm Sean Howard. I'm the Supportive Services Lead for the program. So I'm going to go over a bit about what I do. So Supportive Services, as you can see, we have three main functions, and they all kind of either interlink or overlap to help support our overall goal, which is really to help create a program that our DBEs can succeed in, provide them with as many opportunities as possible, because in the end, we want to graduate them from the program, because that's a benchmark of success in the industry. So we're looking primarily through the outreach function to gather new DBEs, because that helps us out, it helps the prime contractors out to get a larger pool of DBEs. We really want to also focus on education, once again, to give them as many tools as we can get to them so that they can function as successful businesses. And we want to do a lot of networking. It's really key, and you probably already all know this, it's really key in this industry to know your potential clients, to know your potential employers, and to know other businesses so that you can work together. Outreach. We're trying to recruit, we're trying to make a larger pool, and we're trying to get them to be as successful as possible. So we are attending the networking events. We try to meet with other agency partners. Frankly, no one agency has all the resources to do this job. So we regularly partner with other agencies such as IDOA and PTAC, provide extra services. Our main services as far as education go, we have two big programs. The Entrepreneurial Development Institute, that's our really big program. That's 10 business days where we go over to get their businesses more prepared to work in this horizontal construction we've done in the past. So if you all know other businesses, both DBEs who are listening and other prime contractors, who you think might really be interested in this program and might be helpful to you, you can direct them towards us, and we'll try to get them involved in our Cindy program. We usually do that in 3 different locations across the state, and it happens 3 days to get these businesses in, give them a little taste of this. We go over management, technology, construction, once again doing business with NDOT because that's very important, because this is a very specialized world. And the dollars really are precious. So, and then back again to our networking. Our other agency partners, a lot of them have also extensive education tools. So we want to work with them and build with them so that our people can really do the best they can. So, like I said before, networking is really important. It's how we know what's going on in the industry. It's how we know how to communicate to our DBEs. It's how we learn about other agencies that we may partner with. So, communication resources. So this has been a really key thing that we've been building on. Because if we learn this information and we don't do anything with it, it doesn't really do anybody any good. So we have a couple of methodologies within the last year that we've really developed to get our message out there. One of the first is you've probably all gotten the newsletter or the .gov email from us. We're trying to reserve that email process for business-related issues directly to NDOT, because we don't want to flood you all with these emails that we all get that we just delete. Those are important things. If you see those, really try to click on that and see what it's about before you get rid of it. The second big thing is our newsletter. So our newsletter is now a quarterly publication. We include bits of our own world. We include tips from compliance, tips from certification. We have an upcoming events section where we highlight the events that we know about. So not only can our DBEs see that, but the other primes and people who are subscribers to our newsletter can see it. If you can see there, this is this is 2 newsletters ago. So there you can see upcoming event. We have the Indiana Subcontractors Association, their kickoff event. So this next newsletter, I think we had 6 different events that we put in there so that people can see what's out there. We also have moved into the realm of Facebook. So as we go to these events, we are putting that out on our Facebook page that we're going to these events. And then when we're done, we're going to give a little synopsis of what we found there. So that's also a really useful tool for everyone to see what's going on in our world. And then our own area of the website. So Supportive Services has its own dedicated area of the website. So you can see the clicks through here, how you get to Supportive Services, and it's a really clear layout of what's going on. So that's kind of Supportive Services in a small nutshell. So like I said, if you know of businesses or individuals that may want to get into this contracting realm, please just refer them to us. We've set up a nice, easy email inbox that is looked through every day, so don't think it's going nowhere. And you can just shoot a quick email to us, say, hey, you might want to contact these people. All right, then. So next up is our contract compliance manager.
Contract compliance manager within the Economic Opportunity Division. We want to thank everybody again for joining us this morning. For this portion of the presentation, I want to talk about the good faith efforts process as it relates to contract leg. First of all, anytime we have a contract that has federal dollars that are attached to it, we look for the opportunity and availability of DBEs to participate on that contract. And based on our current availability of DBEs, the type of project that we are looking at, we will set an appropriate DBE goal for that given project. Once a goal is set, a DBE goal is set on a given project, we look, that project will be awarded typically to the lowest and qualified bidder that submits bids for that project. We look at 2 things in regards to the good faith efforts process. First of all, did the lowest qualified bidder meet the goal? If they did not meet the goal, then we look to see if that lowest qualified bidder has documented adequate good faith efforts to meet the goal. Before I get into kind of what we talk about or look at when a contract has to go to the good faith efforts process, I want to emphasize that NDOT administers a responsiveness good faith efforts program. This means that a bidder must submit its DBE participation plan at the time of bid submittal. The participation plan, often referred to as the affirmative action certification, details and outlines the proposed use of DBEs for a given contract, how they'll be utilized, and the dollar commitments that are going to be committed for that given DBE as it relates to the contract goal. Post-bid efforts are not considered to be good faith efforts, so it's important that all bidders provide, as part of their bid submittal, a sufficient DBE participation plan, again, which is referred to as our affirmative action certification. Some of the things we do look at if a goal is not met, we look at what will happen. First of all is the lowest bidder on a given contract will be notified by NDOT that they did not achieve the stated DBE goal on a contract, and they will be instructed to provide what's referred to as a good faith efforts submission package. That will include, in most cases, a letter of explanation as to why they didn't meet the goal. We'll also request copies of all quotes received, DBE and non-DBE alike. We will also request that they provide a comparative cost analysis. where we can see and they can detail to us how they evaluated the bids in their selection process and any other information they deem necessary to explain why they were not able to achieve the goal. Some of the factors NDOT utilizes to determine the bidder's good faith efforts on a contract where federal dollars are included. We want to look at the solicitation process of the prime contractor. Did they solicit the interest of all certified DBEs that have the capacity or capability to work on that project? Were the solicitations done in a timely manner, giving the DBE plenty of opportunity or ample opportunity to respond to the request for bids? We also look to see if there's been any follow-up communication with those DBEs that were solicited if they happen not to respond to the initial submission of quotes from the prime contractor. Excuse me. We also look to see if the prime contractor tried to separate out contract work items into economical and feasible units where a DBE might be able to come on board on a project at a smaller level that may be more economically feasible for both them to handle and participate on the contract. This is important, especially if the prime contractor wants to self-perform items of work themselves. So we want to see what additional efforts in that regards are taken by the prime contractor. We'll also look to see if there's any evidence that the prime contractor tried to negotiate with the DBEs. And that doesn't mean you have to bid shop or anything. I want to stress that most importantly, but were there talks between the two parties to try to get the DBE in a position where they could participate on the project? We also look at did the prime contractor look to see if the cost was potentially a barrier or perceived barrier for the DBE to work on a project. Again, negotiation piece comes into play there also, but the regulatory guidance also explains that just because the DBE's cost might be higher, it's not a reason in and of itself to discount the DBE to participate on the project. The regulation also does go on to say that costs that are deemed to be excessive and unreasonable do not need to be considered, and that's going to come down to a judgment call on a case-by-case issue, and our review team that goes into the good faith efforts process will take situations like that where cost is perceived barrier. We'll take that on a case-by-case basis and look at it in comparison to the overall project and so forth. One other thing that NDOT takes into consideration when we're going through the good faith efforts process also is how the other bidders on a project performed in their bid process as far as how they brought DBEs in on the project. So a lot of times if the apparent lowest qualified bidder did not achieve the goal, and say there were 4 other contractors that bid on the project, we'll look to see how those other bidders utilize DBEs, and that will be taken into consideration also in our final decision. So after we look at all of that, we will either conclude that the apparent lowest qualified bidder did achieve the goal, or they did not achieve the goal. If we conclude they did achieve the goal, then we will notify our contract administration group, and they will proceed with the award process. If we feel that the efforts were not sufficient to meet the goal, we will still contact our contract administrations group, and they will provide notice to the prime contractor that the initial decision by NDOT was to recommend not awarding the contract. They can come in and further present their case or provide additional information that may not have been included with their initial good faith efforts package. At that point, the review committee will have an independent review officer, which is our chief legal counsel, who is not party to the original decision. She will oversee the informal review. After that concludes, one final decision will be made whether we feel that after further information was reviewed that the contractor did provide good faith efforts, and will recommend awarding of the contract. If we still feel good faith efforts were not made, we'll make a recommendation to the commissioner to recommend not awarding the contract. And if that does occur, I kind of talked about it originally. Yes.
Before I keep going, so when it comes to the actual documentation process, initially you had kind of like a requirement and kind of Excel sheet of what you wanted to see.
Yes, the letter that you'll receive from our contract administrators group will have a bullet point letter that of requested items that need to be included with that, your good faith efforts package.
And does that also include kind of like a ballpark percentage or number that is maybe like a minimum of like for an outreach, so like a specific contract?
No, we're not going to direct you as far as specifics that you need to provide. It's more of a general bullet point of documents that we've seen over the past that we really rely upon in making our decision and need to review. So
we're just kind of shooting in the dark. There's no real structure in regards not only to recording, but kind of like our at least maximum or minimum of what we need to do in regards to good faith effort.
No, we leave that up to the contractor themselves. I kind of start out this portion of the presentation by saying that we set DBE goals on contracts that have federal dollars attached to it. And that also has contracts that we go through the letting process that are 100% state funded. In the case of those contracts, we've got, although they're NDOT contracts, the M&W&V program, which is the Minority, Women's, and Veterans program, you'll always see three separate goals on those contracts. The current goals as they stand right now for minority business enterprises is 7, women business enterprises 5, and veteran business enterprises are 3. So instead of just one DBE goal on federal aid projects, 100% state-funded contracts have 3 separate goals that need to be attained in the bid award process. Now, although they are NDOT contracts, the Department of Administration actually administers the M&W&V programs, and the good faith efforts process as a result goes through them for evaluation. Somewhat similar to what we do, but not quite as comprehensive. So with that concludes the good faith efforts process. Any questions that I can answer for anybody at this point? Yes, sir.
For federally funded contracts, what's the percentage?
I'm sorry?
For federally funded contracts, what's the
Yeah,
percentage?
we don't, there's not a stated goal for contracts like on the state funded projects. We have contracts where we don't set DBE goals on that have federal monies, and again, we look at the project itself, what opportunities are available within the project for DBE participation based on our current DBEs that are registered with NDOT. And then from that point, we've got a proprietary formula that we utilize based on availability of DBEs and the type of work that is available to the DBE that we set the goal on. So, like I said, some contracts won't have any goal. We usually have a maximum goal right now that we go up to of 14%, but it can be anywhere from 0 to 14% typically right now. As Libby Crawford indicated earlier, we're in the process of going through a disparity study right now, which will reset, if you will, with the Federal Highways Administration's concurrence, our projected or required goal that we need to attain for our next 3-year cycle. So that's kind of the process on the DBE, and there's not any set goal. It's just dependent upon the type of project and the availability of the DBEs for that project. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. Next presenter will be Del Ballard. He'll be talking on the commercially useful function rules.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about commercial useful function. It's called CUFs. That basically is where we go out, or where the DBE is showing that they are actually in control of their operations. That is when they're ordering, negotiating the price, and carrying out the work with their own workforces and different things like that. And so that's the very key. That's as an EE officer, that's what we go out on the project and do. As you see on the thing, it has negotiating the price, determining quality and quantity, ordering materials and installing where applicable, and paying for the materials, and that's the key thing. A lot of times, we may find that materials are being delivered where, the prime is paid, so we're always looking at invoices and different things like that, so you know, those are things that we look at out in the field, and those are control items that we use to make sure that that the commercial useful function is being performed. And we like for you to let the project supervisor or engineer know in advance when your DBE is going to work, because we actually come out and go over issues with them. And sometimes our project supervisors or engineers in some districts are trained to do that, and in other districts, the EOD officer actually comes out and do that. Okay, categories of DBE credit. We have supplier, in which you get 100%, supplier manufacturer, you get 100%, and supplier retailer, you get 60%, and then supplier broker, that's based on the markup that you get. DBE credit is based on how you decide to use that DBE. One of the things that we look at is to make sure that the DBEs are actually performing what you say they're doing. You know, if they're a supplier, we want to make sure that they are a supplier, that ordering for you and their name being there and then coming to you, then it's considered a dealer or a broker. So make sure that you are aware of that whenever you're using a DBE or as a DBE. Make sure that the prime is aware of how much credit they're going to get for your participation, okay, because we're looking at that. Again, you know, DBE manufacturer is a firm that operates, maintains a factory or establishment that produces the following materials, supplies, articles, and equipment. So we're looking at all those things. Then we come to hauling. One of the things is DBE is responsible for managing and supervising the entire trucking operation for which it is running. Now, when you have a DBE trucking firm, we ask for the lease agreement up front in the pre-con, and that should list dollar amount and all that information for us and signed signatures on those. And also, we like to have those because that's considered, they've got to use that to also, in site exchange, give them approval date. And then also, we ask for anyone that the DBE uses to fulfill their obligation on your project, we ask that that lease agreement also be submitted. We want to know who's out there hauling on behalf of the DBE. And we also want them to have their name and their number on the trucks, like up on the wood part or somewhere, and you're not to cover up your name, like Ballard Trucking, she's hauling for the DBE. So that's one of the things we look for. And then we talk about the DBE receives credit for the total value of transportation it provides with its own truck, and then also with the other trucks. And they show the example at the bottom. And that example is where you have a DBE firm that is actually a prime hauler, and then they're using another DBE firm as another trucking company with them. And then at the other part of it is where they use majority truckers. And then that shows you the example at the bottom. All the money for the DBE trucking is covered at $350,000, and then the $400,000 is paid to the majority trucker, and you got $700,000. I have a situation where one of my contractors was leased for $127,000, and they wanted to do the work with their entire trucking force, and they wanted. And the agreement was that they would come in at a certain time period, and they were scheduled over. And so what that DBE did, they still supplied the trucks when they called, but they were majority trucks. And so those trucks were $400,000 trucks. Now that DBE's actual contract for hauling, which is 100% you get for hauling, was $127,000. So only when her trucks were there did she count that money toward the $127,000. At the end, the total hauling was $475,000 for her to, in order for her to get her $127,000, because the way they scheduled over her sometimes and dispatched over. So that's another thing we watch for. And when a DBE, when you make a lease agreement with them, make sure if they're gonna use their trucking force or if they're gonna use other people's trucking force. Because sometimes DBEs call and say, hey, I gotta use somebody else. You gotta make sure up front what the agreement is and cover that. And the federal regulations is, on a lease agreement, when you're dealing with DBEs or in a situation like that, they must have control over the lease. So they'll have exclusive control of the truck, whatever they need. So we look at that also. So, you know, they just write the lease and then they don't have exclusive control. Like when those trucks were dispatched, if they needed 10 trucks and, you know, that was scheduled for that to happen and it didn't happen, we're looking at, you know, why wasn't they dispatched or what the situation was. So we're always just monitoring and watching such a situation, circumstances with trucking. And so one of the things is you want to make sure that you know who the DBE is. If they have leased, if they have to lease additional trucks, make sure that when you sign with them, if they're going to use only their trucks. That's something that we're having a big problem with, so make sure you know. And as I already had covered, in addition to the lessor's identification number, name, lease truck must be displayed, and identification for the DBE firm. All right, brokering agreements. DB has contract line item drop ship directly from a manufacturer's facility to a job site, never being in the physical possession or transported by DBE. Again, invoices, we go out and look at those, primarily like steel. When we do a company who's a DBE and they do your steel, we'll go out and pull the tag, see who actually bought it, if you're including that materials in the actual total for them to participate on the job. And then we have the outsourcing a portion of the subcontract to third party or lease agreement. Now, where that issue comes up was when a DBE, and it was in the painting, they did not have the $500,000 machine to perform that portion of the work. What, any portion that they have someone else or majority performing, we will discount that from the total that they had, you know, we credited to you as a prime contractor. So make sure that whenever you subcontract a DBE, say I got a $150,000 contract with you, and you expect me to do $150,000, but I'm going to lease or get someone else to perform a portion of that, which may be $60,000. Then that drops that to $90,000, and that's all that that's all I can be credited for because we're watching that. So make sure that you understand that the DBE, or you know and understand both the DBE and the prime, that exactly what's happening, how things are going to be credited out there, okay? And I touched on that a little bit already, the DBE purchasing supplies or leasing equipment from the prime or any affiliates. We're looking for the DBE to be solely independent, to perform work themselves, their supervision themselves, and not depend on anyone. We expect them to come out there and operate, have the same information that any other subcontractor will have, and perform the work. And we want to make sure that their employees are, we like for foreman in Seymour District to be on the project. We request that now for the prime contractor, because you are in control of that job. Our subcontractors with you. And so we're, in Seymour District, we're requesting and asking all primes to keep the foreman on the job at all times. And one of the things on the second point on the red flag, let me jump to that. DBE sharing employees with another non-DBE contractor. Went out on a job one day, and the prime contractor was working, and I went out there to do a CUF on the contractor. Pull up, see the DBE truck with this name on it. I'm looking for the DBE employees. Everybody's got the prime contractor's name on their shirts. So I see what their performance is. So you work for this company? Yes, I do. I'm out of the union hall. Well, you can't wear the prime contractors and stuff. It's called brand. If you go to EDI, you as a company want to make sure that your employees can be identified as a DBE. That is your responsibility. You shouldn't have to go out there and guess and look around. And make sure that your employees are wearing your uniform and your company logo, and not the primes, okay? And then as it goes, equipment used by the DBE belong to the prime contractor or affiliate. No ties with anything, no primes or anything. Make sure that, again, we're just making sure that the DBE is actually performing all the work, not tied to anyone, no assistance from anyone, okay? Any questions? Karen, no questions at all?
No, I got it.
Okay,
Thank
all right.
you.
Okay, I appreciate everyone listening and giving me your attention. And so hopefully, if you do have a question, make sure that you call the EEO officer. I would rather take 10,000 calls to resolve a situation or make something work smoothly than to take one call that's a mess that we have to uncall, So we're readily available. Diane Kiefer, Kent Rogan, Jennifer Hicks, Sarah Reese, and Mary Coleman, and Dale Ballard. But make sure you use us, because that's what we're there for. We want the contracts to run smooth. And calling us, talking to us, using our expertise will make the job run smooth. Okay? Thank you.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about when you've got a listed DBE on a project through the affirmative action certification, and there needs to be a change in that utilization that's listed. What we look at is, I just want to go over the general rules and kind of the notification procedures that are required, the reasons for good cause to remove or terminate or reduce a DBE's commitment, as well as some of the ramifications or penalties for not following the procedures that are outlined in the regulations. So, in general, a contractor may not terminate a DBE or reduce its commitment to a DBE that's been listed on the affirmative action certification without NDOT's prior written consent. That's important. In notification to the affected DBE with a copy to myself or NDOT. Usually those get directed to me or through one of the EEO officers, and they'll forward that on to me. But anyway, the DBE that's affected by the reduction or termination request must be notified. NDOT must be copied on that notification, and the DBE must also be provided in writing the reason why the prime contractor or subcontractor is requesting to terminate the relationship or reduce the commitment. In that communication to the DBE, that they must also be informed that they have 5 business days to respond with or without objection to the request to terminate their commitment or reduce their commitment. That's important as well. That's one thing that kind of falls through the cracks sometimes, is they don't give proper notification to the DBE. So they have 5 business days to respond with or without objection. If consent is provided by NDOT, the prime contractor must make good faith efforts to, at finding another DBE to perform at least the same amount of work as the DBE that was terminated or reduced under that contract, to the extent needed to still meet the contract goal. If the consent is not provided from NDOT to terminate or reduce a DBE's commitment, the contractor, please pay attention to this, the contractor will not be entitled to any payment for work or material unless it is performed or supplied by the DBE that was originally listed. So if the prime contractor does not go through the proper notification channels and does not have good cause for that matter to reduce or terminate a DBE, they won't get paid. Federal Highway is being more stringent on this. This is a somewhat recent regulatory provision that was done through the last revisions that came out with the DBE rules and regulations, but very important. So you go through the proper notification and consent channels so that you don't get so you get full payment for the work that was performed. Even if the work gets performed, if those procedures are not followed, technically non-payment would occur for those items. Let's to do that. The regulation is specific on this, and it lists the following items to the right here for good cause. First reason is a DBE fails or refuses to execute a written contract. Say you've listed a DBE on the affirmative action certification, and it comes time to enter into that subcontract, and they refuse, for whatever reason, to enter into that contract, then you can come to NDOT at that point and request that the relationship be terminated or the commitment be terminated, and provide the reasoning for such, and we'll do the review for it. Another reason is the DBE fails or refuses to perform the work of its subcontract. It's kind of self-explanatory, but whatever you had entered into with the subcontract, if they are backing out for whatever reason, then that's a reason for a cause for change. The next one is that DBE fails or refuses to meet the prime contractor's reasonable non-discriminatory bond requirements. I've never seen this happen, but if a DBE were to refuse to work in a reasonable non-discriminatory manner, then that would be a reason as well for removal. If the DBE voluntarily withdraws from the project with written notice, most of the time when this occurs, the DBE becomes a capacity issue for the DBE. They've just got too many projects going on, or their scheduling has occurred as such that they're not able to perform on a contract as originally thought. Another reason is the DBE becomes ineligible to receive DBE credit for the type of required. As Derek mentioned, then that is good reason for good cause, and that's brought to your attention. That's good cause to initiate the change process. If a DBE owner becomes disabled or deceased with the result of unfinished commitment, again, that gets into a certification issue in part, but it would be for another reason for cause to make a change in the contract. If NDOT determines that a DBE is irresponsible, this usually results in it's a performance issue where the work or the quality of work is suspect or in question. Then that may be a reason to change out of DBE or reduce a commitment. And then there's kind of a catch-all. The last bullet point in the regulation is any other documented good cause, and that's usually a case-by-case basis. We'll have to look at the particulars of the situation and determine if there is really good cause to remove a DBE. One thing I will tell you, it's only happened once in my stint here with NDOT, is a contractor tried to remove a DBE for convenience, and that's strictly prohibited. Once you've listed a DBE on an affirmative action certification and they are capable to perform the work, you just can't remove them for convenience because you want to self-perform the work. So those are kind of the main good cause considerations that we'll look at as it relates to changing a DBE's utilization, and that can either be a straight out termination or even if you want to reduce your commitment. So, any questions on that material I can answer? Yes?
One of the issues we run into is a change in scope of work that affects a DBE. Items on the DBE sub is removed. That's not no fault or...
Yeah, and that's a good situation. A lot of times when I see this occur, it's a decision by NDOT. Usually it's vetted out at the pre-con or sometimes shortly after the pre-con meeting that an item of work that was originally slotted for a DBE and listed on the affirmative action certification is removed from the contract. I see this a lot with field offices where an existing field office may, on another contract, may just be utilized for this, the contract in question just because of it's very close in location to the contract. But if an item is eliminated from a contract, technically that is going to result in could be a complete termination if that was the only item listed for the DBE, or it's going to be a reduction possibly. The same procedures have to take place even if it's NDOT initiated, because the DBE still needs to be put on notice that their commitment is either being terminated or reduced. They can object if need be. I've never seen a DBE object to that. There's they're disappointed, but if it's an NDOT decision, that's a good cause. That would fall under the last bullet point. But again, the notification procedures and process still needs to occur. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. I believe I'm still up. Let's move, kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about the OJT program. OJT, on-the-job training. Anytime a federal aid contract is awarded to a prime contractor, or there is a contract that rolls over from one year, calendar year, into the next calendar year, that prime contractor is required to enter into a OJT partnership agreement with NDOT. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but that's what has to occur, and I'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the overall purpose of the OJT program is to offer the opportunity for training and upgrading of minorities, women, and disadvantaged persons in the heavy highway construction trades. That's the general purpose, the primary purpose of the OJT program. Again, it's for the advancement and upgrading of minorities, women, and disadvantaged persons. Disadvantaged persons is NDOT's position on this, and it's kind of supported through the federal questions and answers that have been issued on the on-the-job training program, is any person who meets the Health and Human Services Department's poverty threshold guidelines. So technically, anybody, if they meet the definition and the requirements of the Health and Human Services poverty thresholds, could be offered to NDOT and requested to be approved for the on-the-job training program. This could include a white male who traditionally would be excluded from the program, but again, they have to meet the disadvantaged poverty guidelines to be considered. What we look at from that standpoint, if to consider or to confirm disadvantage, is we will look at federal tax returns and W-2s that were provided on those individuals. That's our primary means to validate, if you will, a person's disadvantaged status. So, I mentioned earlier that anytime a prime contractor is awarded a contract or has a contract rollover from the one year to the next, they're going to have to enter into a partnership agreement. What that partnership agreement will do is dictate all the terms of the on-the-job training program. And part of that will, the back page of that will include a calculation format where NDOT will establish what the annual training goal will be for that prime contractor to achieve throughout the construction season. That goal is typically based on a 3-year average of the prime contractors' hours that they have utilized their workforce. Over the prior 3 calendar years, we'll take an average of that. If the prime contractor does not have a 3-year history of working with NDOT, we have another kind of sub-formula that we use. We take into consideration the contract size, the term of the contract, as well as the proposed workforce that the contractor is going to utilize for that contract. And that's how we'll make our decision as far as goal, the OJT goal for that contractor. Once you're in the on-the-job training program as a prime contractor, there are reporting requirements that are required that we monitor throughout the year. It's our way of keeping track of the contractor's goal. Those reports are various. There's monthly reports, quarterly reports, and we also have an annual training report at the end where we do our compliance determination for the contractor based on the initial goal that was agreed upon in the partnership agreement. I want to talk about a little bit on what qualifies as on-the-job training. There are only two ways you can get on-the-job training credit for an apprentice or a trainee, and that's either through a U.S. Department of Labor approved registered program or through a program that has been approved through the Federal Highway Administration. Now, I will say that all of the programs that are being utilized by the NDOT contractors to date are typically fall under a U.S. Department of Labor training program, or apprentice program. But there is the option to have a program if you don't have a OJT training program that's been approved through USDOL. You can technically have one approved through Federal Highway, but we don't have any on record right now, but that is one alternative. Also want to talk about recruiting sources. NDOTS has a list on our website of recruiting sources. We've kind of broken that up by district to provide some extra assistance and guidance for the prime contractors. We've got over 300 recruiting sources listed on this link there. I believe, yeah, we've got a link there for everybody. It's going to include anything from employment agencies, local union contacts, minority and women organizations, and some other organizations that we found to be beneficial as far as referrals and recruiting. Okay. This next slide just kind of shows you kind of how to get to all of the on-the-job training links that we have on our website. I won't spend a lot of time there, but you can get to, again, the resources, you can get to the partnership agreement through the website as well, and also the reporting forms that we require to be submitted to us either monthly, quarterly, or annually. Compliance evaluations, I want to talk a little bit about that. At the end of the year, at the beginning of the year, through the partnership agreement, we will establish what the on-the-job training goal should be for a given contractor. We monitor that throughout the construction season. At the end of the construction season, we will do a compliance evaluation based on what the program, agreed to program OJT hours will be versus what the contractor actually achieved throughout the construction season. If the goal is met, which we hope, that's great. We'll issue a notice of compliance to the contractor, and everything's good to go. What they did to attempt to achieve that goal and why they were not able to achieve that goal. Once we review that and we are either in concurrence with it, we'll issue a notice of compliance for the show cause that was issued originally. If we do not think or we conclude that sufficient good faith efforts were not administered to achieve the goal, then what we will issue is a corrective action plan that will need to be submitted. And that corrective action plan will have to detail out how the contractor proposes to correct the problem going forward, or what steps they're going to take to make their best efforts to achieve training goals going forward. If we agree to that and it's accepted by us, then we will sign off and provide a notice to the contractor as well. Good faith efforts review process. One of the things we look at also when goals aren't met is we look at we'll go from project, we'll take each project that the contractor had, and we'll look at their workforce utilization, as well as the apprentice ratios that are available through the Department of Labor approved training programs. All OJT apprentice programs have built into them through the U.S. Department of Labor an apprentice to journeyman ratio. As an example, I believe the laborers is it 4 to 1? Yeah, 4 to 1. So for every one journey person that's on the project site, there can be up to, but not exceeding 4 apprentices. If we look at a contract for a contractor, and we pull what is referred to as the 1391, which is their workforce utilization report, and we see that there was an opportunity to bring an apprentice onto a project, that will be one of the factors we look at in making our compliance determination. if we see that there wasn't an opportunity to bring an apprentice on, that would be an excusable reason or a bona fide reason, I should say, why a particular goal may not have been met as far as the training opportunities. So, any questions on any of that right now? I would like to say that Katie Daniels, who will be up presenting next, is our new, she's been with my group for quite a while, but she's switching roles, moving out of the prompt payment, which she's going to talk about today, as well as the DD3 process, and her role is going to now transition into the on-the-job training administrator function, so she will be, I think I had a chance to be her great resource to utilize, and she'll be administering the program as a contact going forward. So with that,
I am a contract compliance specialist in the OJT program lead. First, I'm going to talk about prompt payment. At EOD, we do prompt payment, so we make sure that the clients pay the subcontractors timely. They have 10 days to pay the primes once they get paid from EOD. So what we do is, every month I go through the contracts and I pick 2 contracts to do audits on, and then if there are any issues that DBEs have reported to me regarding them receiving payments on time, I will do targeted payment audits on those. So if you have any issues receiving your payments on time, so we want to make sure that the primes pay within the 10 days, and then the prime also has to make sure to make full payment of the retainage to the subcontractors within 30 days. So basically what I do in my audit process is I will request copies of canceled checks from the prime contractors, and I will get copies of the invoices that the subcontractors submit, and I will compare all of those with the invoices and see what the balance is at the end to see if you are paying properly or not. And if there is still a balance owed at the end, you will be found non-compliant, and we will go evidence that you have paid that balance in full to the subcontractors. And once that is paid in full, you will receive a letter of compliance. So basically, prompt payment is there to ensure that the subs are being paid in full for their work done on your projects. And if they're not being paid in full and it becomes a routine pattern that we notice, that could be a breach of contract, because it is written in all in that subcontracts, and there could be some administrative sanctions with pre-qualification.
If you could speak up just a little bit, the people online are having trouble hearing you. I have our first question from online as well. The question is, how can subs find out when primes have been paid?
Well, they can email me, and I can give them a estimate based off of the estimate date. Because based off the estimate date, they should be paid 35 days, and that should pay within 35 days of the estimate date.
I have one additional question online. Does payment of retainage within 30 days of the sub completing the work mean the entire job or just each portion?
it's for the work that subcontractor has completed.
Can you come to the podium and answer that just so that we have it clearly?
Yeah, that didn't.
And I can repeat the question. Does payment of retainage within 30 days of the sub completing work mean the entire job or just each portion?
That applies to each portion that the subcontractor has completed and has been approved and paid for by NDOT.
Okay, thank you. And Katie, if you'll just continue to speak up, they're having trouble hearing you on the feed. Okay, great.
Any more questions on prop payment? Sorry. Okay, so now, I will go on to the DBE3 closeout process, which is the end of the, and what happens is so the prime will get notified that that their IC 642 is finalized and approved. So then I will send out a DBE3 request package that contains the DBE3 utilization affidavits, the trucking affidavits, the DBE credit worksheet, and the good faith effort summary. And those will need to be filled out by the prime and also by each DBE on that specific contract. So they will have 30 days to get all of that filled out and sent back to me, and I will process that and then make a determination whether they are compliant or not, which means that they met their DBE goal or they did not meet their DBE goal. If they did not meet the DBE goal, but they provided good faith efforts where if NDOT removed items from the contracts, but they added on additional DBEs to the contracts to make up for the shortfall, that would qualify for GFE, or they would then get to meet the goal. Some contracts, they just don't really try on them, so they just do not meet. We don't go very often though. We like for all of them to meet goal. On the next slide, it shows the affidavit. So on the top part is what the prime fills out, and they have to have their section notarized. The bottom part's what the sub fills out, and they have that notarized. And the $2 amounts are supposed to match. It shows the prime is showing what they paid to the sub, and the sub is showing what they received from the prime. So they are supposed to match. If they don't, then that's where I have to call and say, well, these don't match, so what, is there just a slight error? Was somebody mistaken? But usually they match and it's not an issue. But Federal Highway on here likes to make sure that everyone checks what type they are, and that they check the accurate box, and that they fill out this description line accurately, because they look at that, every contract that I complete, I copy Federal Highway on, and they look at those, and if that is not filled out, they call me and ask me what it was done on the contract. So, yes. All we have is
Not at this point.
a PDF form, not at this point, no. So.
Because they have to be notarized.
The numbers need to be the same, but, we have different co-processors, so how much of a leverage are you going to allow, or you would allow maybe 3 cent leverage, 10 cent difference between the two 41?
Can you repeat her question for the video feed, because I'm sure people could not hear it.
Can you say it a little louder?
I want to know if you're going to allow any leverage in the dollar amount, will they be exactly the same, or are you allowing maybe 5 cents here or anything like that?
They should be exactly the same. She asked if the dollar amounts could be different by any leverage, but they need to be exactly the same. because it should be the amount paid and the amount received, which should be identical.
Talk a little bit about some of the issues we run into at the closeout where DBE may have a final payment due on the final estimate that NDOT has not paid yet. And it's not reflected on the, they don't want to attest. Yeah, so the one issue we do run into on occasion is when Katie's getting her DBE 3 affidavits in, the DBE is reluctant to sign off on their portion of payment that they've received because they haven't received their complete payment yet because part of their payment is allowance, and at that point we'll just request that the DBE provide us in the prime contract what that additional payment will be so that those do match up. One other thing I just wanted to interrupt on, not interrupt, but on prompt payment, on retainage, I just want to make one further clarification that payment to the subcontractors when the subcontractor's work is complete, not necessarily the prime contractor, prime contract's been complete. So I want to make that further clarification.
Another thing with the DBE affidavit, we have had some instances where some DBE firms have gone out of business after the project has finished. They did the work on the project, but before the package was sent out, if the prime does not have the ability to get the DBE to fill out the package, they can send in copies of the canceled checks with their filled out top portion, and that will cover proof of payment.
You guys will set up and fill out the final contract amount for the affirmative action certificate?
Initially being made on a proposed or the approved contract amount, but that contract most likely is going to change either through change orders, additions, deletions, what have you, but that goal will ride with the final contract. It'll go with the final contract amount. So, and that's an opportunity if you're not meeting the goal because the contract price went up at the end of the closeout process. Excuse me. That will be part of what you would submit or your explanation and the good faith efforts explanation. Does that make sense?
Okay, I have a question from online. It says, how can I find out what a DBE sub's pre-qualification limit is so that we don't overcommit the amount?
I would recommend that they communicate first with the DBE itself to find out what their pre-qual limit is, and if there's an issue with it, you can always call into the NDOT pre-qualification group, and they will tell you exactly what their limits are and for what type of work. If they are not pre-qualified, I will mention that they are limited to $300,000 of outstanding work at any one time. That is work that hasn't been paid, they haven't been paid for.
And that's total work, right?
That's total work, not NDOT and non-NDOT work. We can verify NDOT work, but it does include the statutes written to its total work outstanding, NDOT, private work, municipality work, what have you.
Thank you.
I will hand it over to Donna.
Good morning, my name is Donna Poole, and I'm a contract compliance specialist. And one of the areas that I oversee is the contract compliance reviews. A contract compliant review is a comprehensive review of the employment practices of NDOT contractors and subcontractors to determine compliance contractual obligations regarding, and that is equal employment opportunity, which prohibits types of job discrimination in certain workplaces, affirmative action, requirements of federal contractors and subcontractors to recruit and advance qualified minorities and females. We normally do between 16 and 20 contracts during a construction season. And what we look for in a prime contractor is has a high impact on the community, which is like a large dollar amount on the contract that was awarded. areas of high demand of minority and female participation, and past compliance issues or patterns of non-compliance. The audit process, after a contractor has been selected, we notify the contractor by certified mail, request and require documentation for the review. At this time, the contractor will be also notified of the scheduling for the on-site verification and the employee interview process for a portion of the review. We allow 21 days for the prime contractor through certified mail requesting that the information be sent to us. And Katie and I would like that to be sent to us by email. We normally have it sent in by mail, but it's easier if you would just send it to us by email. Before the on-site portion of the compliance review, NDOT will analyze the employment patterns, policies, practices, and the programs of the contractor to determine whether or not problems exist by reviewing the information like your certified payrolls, workforce utilizations, employment applications, and complaints. The on-site verification and employee interviews will consist of a construction site visit, and we will interview all your employees, and that's for your subcontractors and the prime contractors' employees. At this point, any concerns or deficiencies and suggested recommendations or corrective actions will be discussed with the contractor. The evidence obtained during the compliance review shall consist of the basis for NDOT making a determination of the contractor's compliance or non-compliance with equal employment contractual provisions. If a contractor is found to be in non-compliance, NDOT will give 30 days show cause notice directing the contractor to submit a corrective action plan to address the on-site outstanding deficiencies. And when we do our on-site reviews, we will give you a packet showing what deficiencies that we have found, and we'll give you 3 days to bring that up to date, so that won't be counted as a deficiency against your company. We will also try to do if you are found to be non-compliant, then we will do a 6 to 12 month follow-up review. Your equal opportunity clause is not included in your subcontract. The E-Verify clause is not included in your subcontract. The Federal Highway 1273 is not included in your subcontract adopted by the contractor position, and one of the might not even know who the EEO officer is. So that's things that we really like to make sure that your employees know. And we also look at your job site posters and for disclosures and make sure that everything that is required by Federal Highway and NDOT is on your job site posters or job site bulletin boards. Are there any questions? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mary now.
Hello, I'm Mary Tony, and I am the compliance officer for the great district of Vincennes. And they save the best for last. They cited the Davis-Bacon Act regulations. So, the one thing I can say right off the bat is if you contractors are already involved with NDOT work, I hope you already know a lot about Davis-Bacon and the other things that we talked about also. But we're going to review them, so hopefully this might pick up any things that you have questions on. So, when does Davis-Bacon and related acts apply? They are applied to any contracts that have federally funds in them, or federally funded completely, or federally funded assisted with state money. So basically all of the NDOT contracts have Davis-Bacon applied to it. The only ones I could think of are probably mowing and lighting maintenance contracts. So you can check your contract documents, but 99% of the time we're talking Davis-Bacon regulations on them. So who does this apply to? This applies to laborers and mechanics that are going to be working on the job sites. Laborers and mechanics consist of your employees, your subcontractor employees, your lease agreement employees that are working with tools. So your tool may be a paintbrush, it may be a backhoe, it may be a shovel, but it's the workers on the job site. So we're protecting your workers with the Davis-Bacon Act. They're gonna be working on the job site. So what is the job site? Obviously, it's gonna be the building or the construction site that the work is being done on. That could be between the construction sites, as we talk about it in DOT. But also there's other areas that are involved too, and that might be areas that are adjacent to the work sites. I think I skipped a page here, but we'll go to that. The site of work. Any place where a significant portion of the work is being constructed. So it doesn't necessarily have to be on the job site, but where a lot of the work is being constructed. And I'll give you an example of that. We had a contractor that was building a custom railing and fencing for a job site. So this was a welding company. They did all their work at their factory, their job site, constructed the whole thing, and then brought it to the job site and installed it. So the work of fabricating it was covered by Davis-Bacon because they chose to do the work for the job at their home office. But normally, we're talking about on-site and other places that are dedicated completely or nearly completely to this project and adjacent to it. So if you have a borrow pit that is located adjacent to your job site, the work that's being done there is also covered by Davis-Bacon. So what is not included? What's not included would be your home office, would be fabrication plants and other facilities by the prime or the subcontractor that was already in operation before this contract started. So there's no reason to include that in Davis-Bacon. It's part of your other operations. And for your suppliers, same thing goes for them. As long as their site was already in operation before the job started and is really not dependent on this contract. So there are times when you're going to set up a batch plant right there on the construction site. It's only for, then it is not part of Davis-Bacon. It will continue after the contract's finished. Okay. So we'll go on to apprentices, whose workers that are also covered by Davis-Bacon. So apprentices are allowed to work on jobs at a lesser rate than a journeyman level employee if they are indeed enlisted and enrolled in a certified training program. So that gives the contractors a break on their wages, but the other part of that is you have a ratio that is given to us by the Department of Labor that you cannot exceed your apprentices to your journeymen. And I hope many of you already know about this. Your area EEO people can tell you what those ratios are, but say for laborers, it's 4 to 1. So you're allowed to have 1 laborer apprentice for 4 journeyman level on the job site. Anything that exceeds that, you'll be required to pay journeyman level wages for the apprentices that are above that ratio. So there are ratios for all different classifications. We can provide those to you if you don't have them. But what happens when you have too many apprentices for that ratio? Again, you pay them over at the journeyman level. We look at this on a daily rate, so you can schedule your workforce accordingly on a daily rate. And that is per contract and per work site. So if you're looking at company-wide and you think your ratios are in order, we're looking at that particular job site and that particular payroll. So when we go through the payroll and look at your apprentices to your journeyman level people, that ratio needs to be in order, or we're going to require you to have back pay to those apprentices at the journeyman level. Any questions about that? Right. Certified payrolls. We all have to do payrolls. big thing about payrolls is, and believe it or not, I'm telling you these things because it comes up, is you have to pay your people weekly when you're working on an EOD contract. Each contract has to have a compliance statement. The compliance statement needs to be accurately and completely filled out also, and you need to do these weekly. So we get them on a regular basis. You are responsible for your subcontractors and anyone else that's required to do a payroll. You're responsible for all of them. You need to get them in regularly, which we say is weekly. Combining them all in a big packet and sending them once a month is not being compliant, and somebody will contact you about that. Also on your payrolls, a lot of times I get comments and questions from the contractors saying, well, this one employee, we're doing something different with them this week, or we're paying them cash fringes, and there's not a problem with it. The officer's gonna look at it, and then maybe a federal auditor's gonna look at it. So when you send in a payroll, put notes on there so that anyone that picks up that payroll is gonna understand the situation and not give you a call back and say, there's something wrong with this one. Put your notes on there, just fine. And whenever there's an unusual situation that needs additional information or explanation, attach it to the payroll and make sure it's attached to every one of those payrolls if there's a situation that needs more information. Some people make a combination of fringe benefit payments in cash, and maybe some are paid by the company already in the form of health insurance. Provide that breakdown information in each one of your payrolls, so when somebody else picks it up and looks at it, they can determine whether or not you're paying the correct wages. So we ask questions about that. That's what we're trying to make sure your payroll is complete and there's not going to be questions by an auditor down the road. You're responsible to keep your payroll records for 3 years in your office. There are times, and many of you may already know about it, that we're going to contact you and say, we need payrolls for this contract, and it may be 2 years old. But we've been requested to provide them. We come back to you, and you have to provide those to our office. So make sure they're available for at least 3 years. What do you put on your payroll? You have to have your employee's name. You have to have an identifying number, not the full Social Security number. The classification or multiple classifications. If they're working 2 different classifications that week, you can list them twice. 2 different pay rates, that's fine. The hourly rate paid and the fringe benefit amount or the cash amount. The daily and weekly number of hours worked. The deductions and the net. That needs to be on every pay. And again, that statement of compliance, that's complete. In wage interviews, we are required to do wage interviews by federal highway. We are trying to do those on a weekly basis so that the employees that are on the job site know they can approach us if they have a question. Again, since it's required, you really can't interfere, and you have to trust that we're not going to interfere in the job activities as much as possible. We'll try to do them when they're taking a break, but you have to allow the interviews and to give them privacy when they're doing that so they can feel free to talk to us. Okay, the employee notice, when they are working on a Davis-Bacon job, there is the poster. It's Federal Form 1321, WH 1321. If you don't have it, you can print it off the USDOL website. Your EEO officer in the district can give it to you. It has to be posted at all times on the bulletin board, as well as many other posters. But also, this blank section right here, that's an area where you're supposed to have the information on who an employee can contact if they have a question. That information should be the EEO person for the district you're working in. And if I see a blank one like that in my district, you're going to get a call and say, put my name on there. Or I give you the copy with my name on it. So that information has to be there so an employee knows who to call. Enforcement actions. Is this the fun part or what? We hope this never happens, but we have steps in place to enforce that you are compliant with the issues that we've talked about on Davis-Bacon. hopefully the first step we take is contacting you and saying, you have this issue, and we advise you when we expect it to be remedied. If for some reason that doesn't happen and there's not the cooperation that we need to have, we will hold the estimate on the job. The whole estimate. Nobody gets paid until this issue is taken care of. So that's what Federal Highway would do to us, and we want to protect ourselves, and the next step is to make sure our contractors are compliant. So we can do that. Terminate the contract. That's a pretty serious step, but it is within our rights to do that. I hope it never comes to that. That's a big step. But the last one, getting the USDOL involved, that happens more than you think, because a lot of times if an employee has a problem, they'll contact DOL as well as us. So once they're involved, they don't go away until the situation's remedied. So, and once DOL gets involved, whether it's you or your subcontractor, information is requested, there'll be hearings, depends on what level of cooperation we get, but I've been on those hearings, and they can pull your federal money from any job you're working on until this issue is resolved. So, keep that in mind. Just hopefully we're discussing things and working on things before it ever gets to that point, but that can happen. Finally, common violations of the Davis Bacon related acts. Misclassification of laborers and mechanics. Well, that could be because you had a laborer working as an operator and you only paid him as a laborer. You can't do that. You can split up his day and pay him both rates. You can pay him the higher rate, but you have to classify him for the amount of work that he's done. Also, something that I come up with, when you have a classification of worker that there's different groups, like your operator, you can have different groups of operator, and you may be paying them at a lesser rate for a group C, but you don't put it down on the payroll. Well, again, you can't read your mind. We just think it's going to be a group A or group 1. We're expecting that rate, and if it's any different, you need to put it in there. He's a group C operator. And that happens different times, but if you're paying different rates to different operators, put on their group that they're on. The failure to pay full prevailing wage, including fringe benefits and for all the hours worked. What we're looking for in your total rate that you pay them is a combination of the cash hourly rate and the fringes combined. So know that if you're paying over in one, the other one can be lesser, but we look at the total amount. And if you're not paying the full rate, there's your classic violation. Inadequate record keeping, such as not counting all the hours worked, recording out the hours by an individual, or the different classifications. Make sure you have all your workers on your payroll. Again, this has happened where, oops, this guy left off half of his people. Well, there's records that we cross-check, and we want to make sure all your employees are reported. If your fringes are different than what are on the cash fringe, that's not your total. If you have a spreadsheet to explain that, make sure it's on each payroll again so we can see that. Failure to maintain a copy of your apprentice program registration documents. If you're using an apprentice, you need to have that documentation not necessarily attached to each payroll, but available so that we can verify that they are indeed in a bona fide apprentice program. Failure to submit certified payrolls weekly. Again, don't bundle them up and send them once a month, even if they're your subcontractors and you don't get them in. You're still responsible. Call them up and say, hey, you've got to do this because it's on my back, comply, or you have your opportunity to affect them. The other big thing is to make sure there's none missing. And again, we look at those payrolls, they're in a big file, and if I see one in March, one in April, and one in May, what happened in all those weeks that aren't in there? You should either have them numbered sequentially, so if you worked those 3 months, I want to see payroll numbered 1, 2, and 3. so I know that's all that you did. Or a statement that says no work these weeks. Because once again, if an auditor picks up that file, they're gonna say, well, you know, I've only got a third of the payrolls here, what happened to these other weeks? And some people do that on purpose, trying to hide some information. We need to have knowledge that our records are complete. So number them, give us a statement, even an email that says no work done to be done until this date. So we can put it in the file and know that our records and your records are complete. And finally is failure to post the poster and the wage decision at the project site. So the poster goes up. I'm going to talk about the wage decision. Probably missed this at the beginning of my presentation, but the wage decision is available in the contract documents. It's available on our website, and it's required to be in every subcontract that you give out under contract. So that needs to be posted on the bulletin board in its entirety and accessible. You can spread it out, you can staple it, if you can get access to it, stick it in the mailbox that's attached to your board. The whole packet has to be available to you from there. So, anybody got any questions?
The wage rates can be compiled in one bundle, put in the bulletin board, as long as the bulletin board is accessible. Correct?
That's, if it's like in a binder, wage rate attached.
Because I'm getting estimates because they said they got to be spread out all over the board.
I've talked to your person that is advising you that. I mean, what do you say?
I've always been told if it was stapled together where they can open the door and get to it, it's all right to be packed. Because I mean, you put all them rates on, you'd have to have 10 bulletin boards.
It's acceptable to have them, as long as they're accessible.
Okay.
So if it's got a locked front on it and they can't get to it, that's not acceptable.
We have people that put a mailbox, attach it to the board, but you have to tell people what's in there. Wage rates inside, or draw an arrow, and of course, it always has to be accessible. Because if you do have to post that spread out, you're talking about a whole 408 sheet of plywood, really, and that's a little bit beyond what we expect. You have another question?
Can you explain what a de minimis rule in layman's terms?
Okay, there's de minimis rule. Two different ways to look at that. If it's 20% or less of their work week. So if you have a mechanic comes on, the truck's down, he comes work on the job site, but it's still 20% of his work week, he does not fall under days taken. And the other guideline appears with haulers. And right now, Department of Labor is working with us to come up with a more definitive rule on the truckers coming in and off the job. So we're waiting for information from them before we put out something more detailed on that.
I have two questions from the internet.
Because some of them, the access to the internet is not as good as they'd like it to be, and other ones, they just like to have the paper documents in hand. So you need to check with your project staff first, and however they prefer.
The second question is, what documentation is needed to verify apprentice status? Is a letter from the union sufficient?
Yes, that's exactly what we look for, and they'll give you a document that says this employee is part of the training program, and I think it says what level and the time frame. Yes, so have that in your files. Okay, very good. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
If there are no further questions, then that's the conclusion of our program for today. I'd like to thank you for attending. Remind you that we'll be sending a survey out via email. For those that are watching on YouTube or employees that you may have app that would like to watch, you'll see the section on commercial useful function. So we'll be dividing those out into easy bits to read. Okay, thank you so much for attending.